There is cheating at Reynoso's gym, but it's being used as a scapegoat. After Francisco Chawaz Rodriguez Jr. brutally beat down an Olympic gold medalist in top form like Galo Yaffe, it became evident something didn't add up. Fighters in the lighter weight classes, who rely heavily on speed, typically have shorter careers and earlier drops in performance. So it made little sense that a veteran with 47 fights and countless wars under his belt would put on such a devastating pace, one even greater than in his prime. Still, without proof, there was nothing to accuse him of, which is why Bastion Boxing didn't publish an article about the Yaffe-Rodriguez fight. It made no sense to criticize the British fighter's performance, even if his tactical approach was flawed, when his horrific loss came at the hands of someone very likely doped. However, the revelation that Rodriguez tested positive for that bout has allowed us to publicly state what would have otherwise been dismissed as baseless accusations, brushed off as prejudice, envy, and so on. If the substance behind the positive test turns out to be one with limited effects, it might cast doubt on the accusations. But even then, that would only suggest Rodriguez used a more potent drug masked by the ineffective one, because his performance wasn't natural, something Sonny Edwards subtly hinted at during the live broadcast, careful to avoid legal repercussions. Since Rodriguez is also part of Reynoso's team, adding to the list of positives including Canelo, Oscar Valdez, Munguia, and Julio Cesar Martinez, Neri and Ryan Garcia tested positive when they weren't part of this team, it further confirms that something shady is going on at that gym. Still, we must read this situation correctly. Powerful figures behind the scenes in boxing want this info out to use it as a shield for other cheaters. Let's start with the fact that after around 10 years of more frequent testing, VEDA started gaining real influence in 2015, though founded in 2011, it's become clear what's long been suspected: a big percentage of boxers are doping. Even though VEDA's testing lacks frequency and duration, dozens upon dozens of cheaters have been caught, showing how deeply rooted doping is in boxing. In fact, some top-level trainers with decades of experience with boxers, managers, promoters, and others, had said long before this surge in positives that around 75% of fighters in the top 15 were doping, a claim many once considered outrageous, but which, as things stand now, seems increasingly credible. Secondly, even though cases are now coming to light in significant numbers, promoters and governing bodies have gone out of their way to sweep positives under the rug, denying that doping is as widespread as it clearly is. We don't have to dig far into memory to see that nearly every high-profile cheater caught in recent years continues to get fights from major promoters, is praised by their media lackeys, and avoids any real punishment. Many have been fully absolved by the organizations. So, if we consider how deeply rooted doping is in boxing and how the powers that be work to downplay it, even while pretending to fight it, the sudden spotlight on Reynoso's gym, with names as big as Canelo, means just one thing: although the team is guilty, it's being used by decision-makers as a scapegoat to divert attention from the broader doping problem. In other words, they're sending fans the message that Reynoso is the one rotten apple spoiling everything, and that once it's removed, boxing will be clean again. However, although it's clear that there is cheating at Reynoso's gym, we shouldn't be fooled. This is just one case, and a very significant one, but it's by no means the full picture of doping in boxing. There are several world-renowned trainers whose teams are filled with doped fighters who simply haven't tested positive yet, as it's clear that some boxers have transformed their physical performance so radically that it's impossible to attribute it to clean methods. In fact, in some cases even the trainer himself uses steroids, obvious just from appearance, which says a lot about their views on illegal substances. And it's not just elite global teams. All over the world, small gyms and fighters resort to doping, some doing so independently of their technical coaches, using unknown private trainers or high-performance conditioning companies. Speaking of those companies, some are highly suspicious, as they are capable of helping fighters cut massive amounts of weight, which should set off every alarm. Ultimately, with the obvious reality that Reynoso's team is far from the only one, and without the support of governing bodies or promoters to stop the cheating, all we can do is trust our judgment. Like Sonny Edwards with Rodriguez, we must objectively and rationally assess whether what we're seeing in fights is actually possible. If we do that, We'll start asking tough questions about things we've seen, especially in the last 5 years. Is it possible that a mediocre fighter with no quality experience can step in against a world champion and crush him? Is it possible for a heavyweight who had never shown punching power against tailor-made opponents with weak chins to suddenly become a fearsome puncher? That a worn-out veteran suddenly shows off a bodybuilder's physique, better than in his youth? That a boxer with 50 wars and who has suffered multiple knockouts pulls off one-punch KOs while nearing retirement? Some of these things may have legitimate explanations, even a journeyman can have a lucky night, and we might occasionally suspect the wrong people. But this is what the giant horde of cheaters in boxing has led us to, along with the complete impunity granted by the sports power brokers. Finally, as a case that should make us reflect on how poorly anti-doping efforts work in boxing, a sport where fighters risk their lives and physical integrity, it's impossible to close this article without mentioning Imam Khatib's positive test for clomiphene, which became public yesterday. Unless someone intervenes, this Saturday Khatib will face David Morrell, despite the Russian fighter testing positive back in April 2024, a date since which he's knocked out Ricards Balankis, Ezequiel Maderna and Junior Menendez, and also defeated Derval Palacio by decision, all without anyone knowing about his cheating, suspending him, or removing him from his stable. Thanks for watching. More info on our website.